Hello and welcome to the opening section, the opening parasha of the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra. As many of you would be aware, the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, deals primarily with laws associated with sacrifices, purity and impurity, the Kohanim and the Leviim, the Kohens and the Levites. Now, interestingly, at the very beginning of the parasha, we find an introductory verse, and this is what it says: Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lashem, a man who will bring from you a sacrifice to God, min habahema, from the animals, min habaka min hatzon, from either the cattle or the sheep, takrivu et korbanchem, you shall bring your sacrifice. Now this verse is very interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, if you were listening carefully, you would have noticed that it commenced with the third person and concluded in the second person. It commenced with the first person in saying, a man who will bring a sacrifice from you. And it concludes, from the animals, from the cattle, and from the sheep, you shall bring your korban. So it commences speaking in the third person, a man, someone else, a third party, who will bring a sacrifice from you. And then it concludes with, you will bring your sacrifice. The second enigmatic part or aspect to this verse is the fact that it commences in the singular. It commences with a man of you, singular, and concludes in the plural. It says, you, plural, shall bring your sacrifice. Now, those of you who are not knowledgeable in Hebrew may not understand this nuance, but in Hebrew, we in fact have a distinction between you, singular, and you, plural. Takriv is you, singular. Takrivu is you, plural. And the verse concludes with the words, Takrivu is korbanchem, you, plural, will bring your sacrifice. So it commences in the singular, a man of you, concludes in the plural. Now we need to understand the reason for these distinctions and for this dissimilarity between the first part of the verse and the second part of the verse, commencing with first person or third person and concluding in second person, commencing in singular and concluding in plural. The very famous Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was the founder of the Chabad movement, also known as the Alter Rebbe, he explains in his work Leviticus the Torah as follows: that indeed there are two forms of arousal. There is an arousal which is initiated from above, that God Almighty does something to wake up our soul. It could be that we're walking down the street and then all of a sudden we have an urge for spirituality. This is God shaking up our soul from above. We didn't do anything to earn it. We didn't do anything to deserve it. We weren't contemplating on it. Somehow or the other, something outside of us moves us. Sometimes that event may in fact be a traumatic event. There may be a calamitous event in our lives which all of a sudden forces us to be able to think about God, about spirituality, about something beyond ourselves. This is termed in Kabbalistic literature an itaruta de la'ela, an awakening from above, because it's initiated from above. We didn't do anything. Then there is also what is called an itaruta de tata, a shaking up, an awakening from below. And what this means is that we ourselves force ourselves to do something that perhaps we wouldn't have done otherwise. We force ourselves to do a mitzvah, we force ourselves to do a good deed, we force ourselves to be able to take on a better attitude, to be able to deal with people a bit more favorably. It's something which is coming from us. Now the Alter Rebbe explains that God in His great mercy, what He does is, He doesn't just rely on us. It's a kind of a starter motor. You know how a motor car works? A motor car works that, first of all, there is a jolt of electricity, and then the combustion engine is able to take off on its own. But first of all, there is that initial starting. And similarly also, God Almighty starts us off with this isarusa de la'elo, this awakening from above. However, if it's not immediately reciprocated with what's called an isarusa de latata, an awakening from below, then unfortunately that initial startup dissipates, and in the end, we have absolutely nothing from it. And therefore what is required is that we respond in kind to the awakenings from above. And on this basis, the Alter Rebbe explains the verse. And he says, the verse says, Adam ki yakriv mikem, a man who will bring a sacrifice from you. Now, interestingly, the verse doesn't say a man of you who will bring a sacrifice. The verse says a man who will bring a sacrifice from you. Sounds like the sacrifice is from ourselves. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the Hebrew word for korban, sacrifice, is the same Hebrew word as is used in karov, which means to come close, to come near. And therefore what the verse means is Adam. There is an Adam, a real man. We people in this world, we are only made in the image of that real man, of God Almighty. So the man per excellence refers to God. And God, He brings a sacrifice of us. What does that mean? He brings us close. He causes an awakening from above. He wakes us up. He shakes us up. He either gives us a feeling, an arousal that we didn't work for, or He causes something in our lives. It could be a calamitous effect. It could be a very joyous effect, to be able to snap us out of our lethargy. God is in fact bringing us close. He's bringing a sacrifice. He's bringing us close to Him. Why is sacrifice and close the same word? Because the whole purpose of even a physical sacrifice is that it brings us close to God. And then what are we supposed to do? When we feel this arousal from above, we need to respond in kind. We have to bring our own sacrifice. How do we bring our own sacrifice? From our own animal. Every one of us has within ourselves an animal soul. And this animal soul, if it's left to its own devices, will only want to do animalistic things. It's our responsibility to bring that animal soul back to God. This is the awakening from below. And every person in their own way. That's why it says cattle, sheep. There are certain people who have got the characteristics of cattle. They're aggressive people. If you're aggressive, don't try to be able to push it away. Use that aggression in a positive way. Be proactive in going ahead and helping people, in leading people. If you're a sheep, your little shepsel or your follower, that could be an evil inclination. You may not be violent, but you may be following all the fashions of the time. So instead of using it to be able to fit into silly fashions, which are here today and gone tomorrow, use it to be able to become part of a broader community. Be a sheep that way. And similarly also, if a person's a musician, you got a choice. You can play at discos, or you can play at the Hasidic dance festival. If you've got a great voice, you can go and sing opera. You can become a chazan shul. If you're a great communicator, you can use that in the business and secular world, or you can do that to be able to bring people close to Yiddishkeit. If you're a very energetic kind of person, again, you can use that for your own purposes, play sport all day, or you can utilize that energy to be able to bring other people in, get kids involved in sports, so as a result of which they can come close to Yiddishkeit. Take your animal, no matter what kind of animal you have, and use it for God. God has awoken you from above. Now you reciprocate back in time. The ultimate sacrifice, therefore, is not the sacrifice of animals on the altar. The ultimate sacrifice is the sacrifice that God brings from us, the arousal He creates in us, and the reciprocal arousal that we create within ourselves towards Him. I only hope that each and every one of us will merit to have these arousals from above in a very positive and good way, and that we too should reciprocate in kind. But by the way, let's not wait for that arousal from above. Sometimes God's waiting for us to do the initiation. Shabbat Shalom.